Hello, so now we're going to be starting our unit on trigonometry. And the first thing that we'll take a look at are angles in standard position. Before we do that, I just want to go through some definitions. A ray is a line with a start point but no end point. So here's an example here. Our start point is right here, and then we have an arrow going off in one direction, so no end point. An angle is the figure formed by two rays diverging from a common point. So here I have our common point, and then I have two rays coming from that. So the red line shows you the angle that is formed by those two rays. And then the last one, angle of rotation, which is an angle formed by rotating a ray about the origin on the coordinate plane. So here I have a coordinate plane with axes of x and y, and I've positioned one arm of the angle on the x-axis and the other one is rotating from there. Okay, look, see, I'm making it go counterclockwise, and so we have an angle formed, and in this case in the first quadrant. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at are angles in standard position between 0 degrees and equal to 0 degrees and less than 360. We don't say equal to 360 degrees because on the coordinate plane 0 degrees and 360 degrees share the same arm. And you'll see that in a diagram below. Okay, so before we start talking about angles in standard position, we need to get some definitions out of the way. So the first one is initial arm. The initial arm is the arm of an angle in standard position that lies on the x-axis. So this is really important, that it lies on the x-axis. The terminal arm is the arm of an angle in standard position that meets the initial arm at the origin to form an angle. Okay, so this is important. It meets the initial arm at the origin to form an angle. Okay, so this should be sounding like angle of rotation to you right now. Okay, an angle in standard position then is the position of an angle when its initial arm is on the positive x-axis and its vertex is on the or at the origin. And these two things are important. Okay, its initial arm is on the x-axis and the vertex is at the origin. Okay, so this is one item that you need, and this is the second. Okay, so I have two diagrams over here of problem areas where angles in standard position are concerned. The first one is a vertex problem because, as you can see, our vertex, which is right here, is not at the origin. Okay, and our second diagram here, we have a problem because our initial arm, which is this, is not on the x-axis. Okay, so what does an angle in standard position look like? Well, over here. Okay, so here's our coordinate plane, x and y axes. As you can see, the initial arm is on the x-axis, and the vertex is at the origin, and the terminal arm is rotated from the initial arm. Now, in this case, the rotation is counterclockwise, and when our rotation is counterclockwise, we have a positive angle. Okay, so positive angles are red, and I'll use CCW for counterclockwise. Okay, and as you have probably guessed, negative angles are red clockwise. So, okay, so CW for clockwise. Okay, now the scope of this unit is just going to involve positive angles. We won't be looking at negative angles. You can look at those next year in Pre-Calc 12. Okay, so one other thing before we get started drawing angles in standard position is what are the measurements of our angles as we rotate around the circle going counterclockwise. Alright, well on the x-axis here it's 0 degrees. Okay, and then if we rotate a quarter of a turn, we are at 90 degrees. And then another quarter of a turn, we're at 180. Another quarter of a turn, we're at 270. And then a full turn around the circle gives you 360 degrees. So you can see here then that 0 degrees and 360 degrees share the same position on the coordinate plane. Okay, all angles in the first quadrant are between 0 and 90 degrees. Notice not equal to 0 and not equal to 90 between them. Okay. Angle measurements in the second quadrant go from 90 to 180, but not equal to 90 and not equal to 180. Third quadrant angles go from 180 to 270, but once again not equal to 180 and not equal to 270. And those angles in the fourth quadrant then are between 270 degrees and 360 degrees, and once again not equal to 270 and not equal to 360. Okay, we give the angles 0, 90, 180, and 270 and 360 degrees a special name. They're called quadrantals, and we'll take a look at those later. Okay, so let's sketch some angles in standard position. Okay, our first example is 36 degrees. What you first want to do is to identify which quadrant it's in, and in this case, because it's between 0 and 90 degrees, we're in the first quadrant. Okay, so we're going to draw ourselves an x and y axis. Oops. Okay, we're going to draw our initial arm. Okay, this is our initial arm. And we will draw our terminal arm in the first quadrant. Remember, our vertex to our angle should be at the origin, so we're going to draw something that looks like it could be close to 36 degrees. Okay. And so we show the direction by drawing an arrow. And we write in our angle measurement. Okay, so here's an angle in standard position in the first quadrant. Okay, take a look at our next example, 210 degrees. That's between 180 and 270, so that puts us in the third quadrant. Okay, so draw yourself a x and y axis again. Okay, the initial arm on the x-axis, and then our terminal arm in the third quadrant, so something like this. And then give your angle direction by drawing an arrow going counterclockwise, and then label it as 210 degrees. Okay, and so our last angle is 315 degrees. It's between 270 degrees and 360 degrees, so that puts us in the fourth quadrant. Okay, so draw yourself an x and y axis. Okay, initial arm on the x-axis and terminal arm in the fourth quadrant. Give it direction and label it 315 degrees. Okay, so that will end our discussion on angles in standard position.